So we got a new visa waiver program snuck in, as a lot of these laws are these days, into a much bigger bill. And they decided, oh, you know what, we're going to get tough on Muslim countries. Oh, good for you. The only problem is it also affects citizens of our allies, including the UK, Europe, and eventually our own citizens. So let me explain. The Intercept says people coming from countries covered under the visa waiver program, including people who are citizens of those countries, will now need to get a visa if they are determined to be nationals of Iran, Iraq, Sudan, and Syria, or if they have visited those countries since 2011. The last provision is even more devastating, because it doesn't matter if you're from there, even if you visited there for business purposes, for any other purpose, well, no, now the rules are changed and you're going to have to get a visa, and it's going to be much harder to come into this country or many other countries. So this is worse than it sounds, The Intercept explains, because at least two of those countries, Iran and Syria, deem people to be nationals regardless of where they were born or live if their fathers are citizens. So it's possible that someone who's a citizen of one of the countries on the visa-free travel list, the United Kingdom, say, and who lives there and grew up there and has never visited another country, could end up denied entry to the U.S. because of a parent born in Iran or Syria. You know who this could have affected if he was still alive is Steve Jobs. His father was born in Syria, so according to Syrian law, he could have technically been a dual citizen. Now, I don't believe that ever came up for Steve Jobs, and obviously this law wasn't in effect at the time. But then you can say, well, no, wait a minute. Now, your dad is from Syria, so that makes you a Syrian citizen as well as a U.S. citizen. That puts you on a different list where you're basically an inferior citizen in this country now. You're going to have to get waivers, and then wait till the other countries strike back at us, which brings us to the next portion. It gets even worse still, because there's a strong likelihood that countries party to the newly altered visa waiver program, including the European Union member states, will institute reciprocal restrictions on Americans, meaning that many Iranian Americans, Syrian Americans, and others in the U.S. would see their ability to travel the world seriously degraded based on ancestry or dual citizenship. So now, if your father was Persian or in the UK and you lived in the UK, you never went to Iran, don't know anything about it, your parents were, your dad, mom, whatever. Well, now if you want to come to the US, all of a sudden, even though you're a citizen of the UK, you could normally just come in, right? That's the waiver program. Now they're like, whoa, we think you're an Iranian. So now you're going to have to go through a different process than all other citizens of the UK. So then the UK goes, well, I'm going to strike back. If you're going to do that, I'm going to say, okay, Americans that are of Iranian or Syrian descent and Sudan, etc., well, now you're going to have to get a waiver to come to the UK or to France or to many other countries. You say, wait a minute, I'm a U.S. citizen. I've never needed a waiver to go to Europe. Well, you do now because you're not the right kind of American citizen. And that's where it would apply to Steve Jobs if he was still alive. Maybe we could make it apply to his kids. Let's go back even further. Okay. Now, potentially facing similar reciprocal restrictions are any aid workers, journalists, or other Americans who simply visited at some point since 2011 the countries targeted in the new legislation. Now, that might also violate our agreement that we just signed with Iran, because in that agreement we said we're not going to do any economic sanctions or hurt your economy in any way. But now, if any businessman travels to Iran for whatever reason, they're from Japan, Spain, it doesn't matter. No, you travel to Iran, you're dangerous by definition, so now you're going to need to get a visa to come into the United States. Well, that's a pain in the ass for a lot of businesses, and they don't want to go through that, so then they don't go to Iran in the first place. Right? And the repercussions go on and on and on, let alone the aid workers who are the most decent people in the world don't go to Syria to help the people who desperately need their help, because now they become basically a second-class citizen in America through this program. So lastly here, targeting people who are dual nationals is particularly discriminatory and unjust, since dual nationality is not something you choose. Under this legislation, if you're a European of Iranian origin or your father is an Iranian citizen, you wouldn't be able to travel without a visa to the United States. As we've already heard from the EU, this would trigger reciprocal measures that would result in the passports of Iranian Americans being treated as inferior, essentially putting them in a category of second-class citizenship. And that's according to Jamal Abdi, who runs the National Iranian American Council. He's their spokesperson. So here are Iranian Americans justifiably concerned. Wait, you just through this provision, made us second-class citizens. My guess is if you asked a lot of the people who proudly passed that provision, they'd go, yeah. But that's not the America we grew up in. That's not the America we love. That's not what America is supposed to stand for. Where all of a sudden now we have second-class citizens with inferior rights. Unfortunately, that is the America we're headed towards. So let's stop it before it gets any further than this. And they've got to repeal this. This is not the right way to go about protecting this country. All it does is put us in a deeper hole. It's counterproductive, and it starts to separate us and question each other as fellow Americans. And that is not the shining city on a hill.